Welcome to West Virginia Beer Roads, a podcast all about beer from a West Virginia perspective. I'm Erin McCoy, here with my podcast partner, Charles Bockway.
In the world of beer, 4 ingredients make up the base of most all traditional beer styles that we commonly drink. You know them: malt, hops, yeast, and water. In this podcast today, though, we're going to focus on malt, and not just any malt, but a newer category of malt known as craft malt.
We're going to learn about what craft malt is, who produces it, and what difference it makes to beer drinkers like us. We're also going to learn how you can find beers that are made by brewers who feature craft malt.
Yeah, malts provide so much of the flavor, aroma, and mouthfeel characteristics you get from beer. It's a big range, so let's dive right in. To bring us up to date on what craft malt delivers to the contemporary craft beer market, we have 2 guests today. First is Brent Manning, founder of Riverbend Malt House in Asheville, North Carolina. Brent, welcome to West Virginia Beer Roads.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
And we also have Sam Fonda, founder of Weathered Ground Brewery, located in the Cool Ridge community of Southern West Virginia. Sam, thanks for joining us today on West Virginia Beer Roads.
Thanks as always for having me.
So Brent, I'm going to start out with you. Just exactly what is craft malt and how does it differ from regular brewer's malt?
Yeah, so malt in general is a global commodity. And so when we talk about what is craft malt, we the North American Craft Maltsters Guild, define it as by a couple of basic tenets. First is a real commitment to local sourcing. So we define that as kind of a regional sourcing, and we look for our member malt houses to source more than 50% of their raw materials from their region. And the next piece, it really is an independent ownership. So we love the fact that all of our member malt houses are coming into this industry with a lot of different skill sets, with a lot of different backgrounds, and they remain fiercely independent and really just committed to the craft of making malt.
Well, before we get into talking more about craft malt and what it means to craft beer drinkers, let's talk specifically a little about Riverbend Malt House. Tell us what you guys do. Give us a quick history of how you got started and how you progressed.
Yeah, so Riverbend, founded by myself and Brian Simpson back in 2010. We always joke that we didn't want to be the 13th brewery in Asheville. So there's 40 plus now. So we definitely missed the boat there. But Brian and I are both really committed to sustainability. And so when we started looking around at the industry, we realized our local farmers were really not part of this billion-dollar industry in North Carolina, and the missing link in that chain was a malt house. And so we went about trying to find farmers and a class to teach us how to do this professionally, and started with our first successful batch in late 2011, and have steadily built the business into what is now about 70,000 square feet and a target of about 4 million pounds of production this year for 2022. So it's been an insane ride. There was no blueprint or business plan for us to borrow to help us get to this point. So it's really been absolutely just insane.
Yeah, I mean that is an impressive startup in first few years.
Yeah. My hair was much browner and thicker when we started. But we carry on, and a lot of big things lay ahead still.
Okay, so we've heard a little bit about what makes a malt a craft malt. Now let's get a quick take on why it makes a difference to a craft beer brewer. Sam Fonda, you brew with a lot of craft malt at Weathered Ground, including malts from Riverbend. What is it that attracts you to craft malt?
Honestly, when I brewed in North Carolina, I met Brent there at a small festival at the time, and he kind of sold me on it. We all talk about local and we're your local brewery. If you're from this area, like Southern West Virginia, we talk about ourselves being a local brewery, but using local ingredients takes it to the next level. And we just love that it's grown regionally and malted in North Carolina. And then when the truck backs up to our loading dock and he opens it, there's no smell like it. I mean, it's freshly malted. It's amazing, and you can talk about it being local all you want, and but quality is there too. It makes the beer taste really, really good, in my opinion. And so it's a big deal to us, as well as having a personal relationship with them. If something, nothing ever happens, but if it did, I've got the owner's number in my phone. I call and see what's up,
Right.
That's just like something awesome. That's, we just love to have.
So you met Brent and then he introduced you to Riverbend Malt. You hadn't heard of Riverbend already, or?
I had heard of it, and he did have a lot browner hair back then, by the way, with luscious locks. But no, I had heard of it through a couple of breweries in Asheville area using it, and then we were set up at a booth there, and he got to talking about it, and he was just really passionate about it, and then by the time we moved to West Virginia, a lot of breweries in North Carolina were using it, and I'd had a lot of their beers made with it, and I was just like, I was scared he wasn't going to send it this way because we're in West Virginia, and it is like 5 hours from Asheville, but yeah, and we only order like 2 to 4 pallets at a time instead of like big time bulk, but we've had no problem getting it, and it's just awesome.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about some of the flavors that malt delivers to craft beer that a beer drinker might detect and enjoy, and also any flavor or aroma differences that the craft malt has as compared to standard malts. Sam, go ahead and take this.
Yeah. So, well, I mentioned the quality is there, but there's also a difference in us. Like, there's a lot of breweries in West Virginia that are making really good beer, and one thing you try to do is distinguish yourself a little bit, and so there's definitely a difference in the flavor of their malt. I think what brewers would call house flavor in beer, you can also, I think, get a house flavor in their malt. It's very like specific the way that it tastes when you're eating it out of the bag or when you're tasting it in the beer, I believe, especially in a beer that's not hoppy. Like right now I'm drinking our Oktoberfest. It won't be out until September, but I'm kind of, tasting it, and it's 100% Riverbend malt. And yeah, it's just, I think there's a difference there. Just kind of like they have a house flavor, and it's really, really good.
Brent, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So we do this analysis called a hot steep, and it's basically like making a malt tea. And what it does for us as maltsters, it's basically QA/QC, so that we know that every batch of our flagship products tastes roughly in line with customer expectations. And so, the cool thing about that is that it's mated to a flavor map. And so it standardizes the lexicon about flavor. And so, for example, like one of our main products is called Base Camp. As the name implies, it's a kind of a multi-purpose base malt. And, we know that we should be looking for notes of honeysuckle and green tea and a little bit of like bread dough or biscuit. And it has depth, and that comes from what Sam's talking about, a little bit of that house character, just like Sierra Nevada can give you the recipe for pale ale. You can brew it in your home system. It's not going to taste exactly like their pale ale, Same with us, so there's a bit of, malt house technique, variety blending and all of this. And so you sort of pull all that together, and then there's the freshness component on top of it. So it's like buying bread from a bakery versus buying bread from the grocery store on the bottom shelf, and so everything, just that sort of bready sort of explosion happens when you mash in with malt that's like a couple of weeks old versus 6 to 12 months old. And so that to us is really where we see a big jumping off point of differentiation. So it's just in that layering of flavors.
Let's get into some best malts for particular styles. For instance, say farmhouse ales and saisons.
Yeah, and while we do that, we got one we're going to be drinking here that Sam Fonda brewed, and let's bring that. So we're here. We have the Farmhouse Ale from Weatherground Brewery in Cool Ridge. It's called Of the Sun and Moon and Stars. That's a different kind of name, Farmhouse Ale. But explain a little bit about what we're getting here in this beer. Well, from the malt, especially.
Sure. So that beer is probably 75 to 80% Cumberland Pilsner malt from Riverbend. We typically buy the Cumberland Pilsner malt because we use it as our base malt in our Cool Ridge lager, which is like our flagship lager here. But we also use it in most of our saisons, farmhouse ales, and so yeah, that's mostly what the base malt there is. And then we probably use a little bit of their heritage malt as well as their Appalachian wheat, which is like their red wheat that's malted there. And it's a pretty basic saison grain bill, mostly Cumberland Pilsner malt with some of their body sweetness malt, and then topping it off with some wheat. And then you're going to get a lot of yeast character too, because it's a saison. So we use a blend of Belgian and French saison yeast.
Well, I guess in many saison, you are using this Pilsner malt because you don't want a whole lot of rich malt flavors at all in there to interfere with that yeast character or the other things that you're putting in it.
We're going to want a lightly kiln malt. I mean, a malt that's lower in color for sure. We want it to be a light beer that's crisp and straw colored. But that malt has got some very good neutral, basic fresh bread, cracker, biscuit like flavors. That's going to go really well with that saison yeast. It's going to let the yeast shine, which is what we want to happen in that beer. But it's still got a great, as it warms up, as it gets really warm, and as you're enjoying it with a meal, you'll start to taste some of those malts come through, and yeah, it's just a great base malt for saisons.
So Brent, is this something that other brewers have also discovered, that this is a great saison or farmhouse ale beer, or farmhouse ale malt?
Sure. Yeah. So Cumberland is part of our single origin series. So, I mentioned previously we kind of blend things to malt variety or barley varieties together when we do some of our flagships. But just as a fun experiment, as we started seeing, the lager interest and exploration really take off, we said, well, let's also peel these apart and do like a coffee program with them, so Cumberland is 100% Calypso barley grown in Tennessee. And then its companion product is Chesapeake Pilsner, which is a variety called Violetta, or uses a variety called Violetta that is grown in Virginia. And so Sam nailed it. So there's definitely crackers and bread dough and all of that coming from Calypso. Violetta presents a little bit more floral, a little bit drier and crisper. And so that's a perfect choice for using in a German style Pilsner that might have, some of that continental hop profile that would jive really nicely with that. You want that sort of bone dry, crisp finish. And so not to get too nerdy, but the Calypso barley is a 2-row barley, so a little bit plumper kernel and a little bit higher extract per pound. The Heritage you mentioned is made with 6-row barley. It's a little bit smaller kernel, and we kiln that a little bit darker, so that's going to come in like almost like a coppery color, and that's going to give you just a touch of toffee, a touch of toast, and because a saison, you want some malt complexity for sure, and a little bit of color. You want it to have that just a hue. You don't want it to be pale yellow. And the wheat malt we kiln just a touch darker than traditional, like mass-produced malted wheats, and that really unlocks a lot of the sort of the bread crust aspects of artisan bread. You know, it's a little that sort of hard to define, but know it when you taste it, rustic character.
Now, we've talked about Pilsner malts, and that's certainly one of the main categories of malts that brewers are going to use in quantities. But the other category of malts that brewers are going to really need are pale malts that you, especially for like our IPAs and things that are so popular today. Sam, I'll start with you again. What are some of those craft malts that you can use in IPAs that you find really work well?
They make a great malt called Southern Select, and I'm sure the base camp is just as good. We just haven't used it yet. We particularly love in our IPAs using their specialty malts. The Heritage that I mentioned earlier is a great malt for just building body and adding some complexity to the malt bill. It's going to give it a little bit of like he was saying, that toffee sweetness and some. It's kilned a little bit longer, right? So it's just going to change the flavor profile and give it some more body. They make a great Munich malt as well. It's just a little touch darker than we want to use for a lot of our IPAs, but we use it in a lot of our other beers. And then, of course, their Appalachian wheat goes in every IPA we make. So yeah, if you're building a pale ale or an IPA, I highly recommend that Heritage malt as well as that Appalachian wheat.
Nice.
As well as the rye. We do like three different hoppy rye beers with the Carolina rye. We've got a beer called Scrappy, which is a rye pale ale, and it's like 25% Carolina rye. And then we have its big brother called More Scrappy, and it's like a double rye IPA. And then we also do like a lower alcohol rye IPA called Little Wrangler, and it also has like 20% of that Carolina rye in it.
You touched for just a second on some of the darker beers. You mentioned a brown ale or a porter. So what about malt? What's best for a porter or a stout or something that's darker? You need some more color than an IPA or a farmhouse saison.
Are you asking me or Brent? Sorry.
Okay, both of your all's opinions. We'll go ahead and start with you, Sam.
A lot of people, when they think of stout and porter and stuff like that, they immediately think about like the roasted malts, right? Chocolatey, coffee flavored malts. But to make a good one, you really need some good specialty malts that are not dark, that are going to add body and different layers of complexity to the beer. And so that's where they make just awesome dark Munich malt and light Munich malt. And I mean, I left this one out when I was talking about our IPAs earlier, but we just started using this malt a little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago. They make a bodybuilding malt called Great Chit, and we put it in almost every beer that we don't want to be bone dry. It's become our favorite malt here, and it's great for like adding some mouthfeel to a porter and getting that body up. It's just it's really great for hazy IPAs that you want to have like a creamy mouthfeel, kind of like viscous, and not be super bone dry. That Great Chip malt is just something else, and I'm sure you can add to that.
Yeah. So a lot of stories to unpack there. So first off, when we talk about making Munich malt versus base malt, you're talking about a longer and warmer kilning regime. So a lot of the early steps, so when we start making malt, steeping, germinating, kilning, 7-day process, door to door, pretty basic stuff. But where you begin to differentiate products is by the length of germination and how you treat it in the kilning or the drying step of the process. So when we're making something like Southern Select, a nice sort of pale malt style product, kilning has some airflow recirculation, and temperatures typically finish in the 190s Fahrenheit. But when we talk about making Munich malt, we're going to stretch that kilning regime out. And I always tell people to kind of envision like grandma's crock pot and in the kitchen, you know, slow simmering, getting all those beautiful flavors to meld together in a stew on a cold winter night. Like that's kilning Munich malt right there. We're sort of slow and slowly building temperatures. We'll spend, depending on how dark we want the finished malt to be, is really a determinant of how many hours we spend, typically above 194 Fahrenheit. A lot of reactions begin to happen above that temperature that build color. And so dark Munich obviously spends more time than light Munich in that temperature range. So really fun to sort of play with those dynamics there. Sam touched on a chocolate malt or a roasted malt, and you actually need a roaster very similar to a coffee roasting platform to produce those malts. They're used in small quantities, but they contribute a lot in the color department. So they help you get that sort of jet black look of an imperial stout, or that sort of dark ruby red, almost black hue of a nice English porter. So that we can get to a certain point of color development, but without a roaster, we're sort of constrained a little bit. But we can do plenty of things to give, you know, probably access, you know, all but the stout category in terms of color achievement. So pretty interesting.
It's really great to see that you know, we're able to do this now at small malt houses around, well, our region of the country. You know, North Carolina is not too far from West Virginia. We have a small craft malt in Ohio. I know we have others in our region. So what I'd like to get into with you, Brent, though, is, you know, starting a new malt house is a big undertaking. But starting a new malt house in an area of the country that farmers didn't even grow the right kind of barley, or probably didn't grow much barley, period. I mean, that's got to be it was a huge undertaking. So what I'd like to ask you is a little bit about, how did you get started? Because you've got to have the product from the local area. How did you get those growers to learn to grow malting barley for you?
Yeah. No, excellent question. And a huge shout out always to our friends at the agricultural extension agencies, both in North Carolina and in Virginia. They were absolutely instrumental in helping us get up to speed on what it means to grow barley in the South, and then helping us connect us to growers. I always refer to them as students of the game, you know, folks that are really, really looking to innovate, to see what that next new emerging market trend is. And, you know, we grow winter barley in the South. So that means it's planted in October, harvested in June. Most of the barley that goes into the malting industry is spring barley that grows in the Western US, Western Canada, and Western Europe. And that barley grows in the more traditional sort of June to August timeline. And so that's both a blessing and a curse. For us, it meant we were not competing with corn and soybeans, which are the major cash crops. We were actually potentially a third paycheck for growers who wanted to look at growing a different type of cover crop over the winter. And so you're exactly right. I mean, some of my early visits with farmers, you know, they would take me into the barn and show me this pile of somewhat rotting barley and be like, oh yeah, this is what I feed my cows. And I was like, we got a long way to go, you know, before this is going to get to the malt house in terms of quality. And you know, flash forward, you know, even 3 or 4 years later, we had growers that were producing really high yields, much higher quality barley. And so that was all 6-row up until about 2018. And then we got Calypso and Violetta that year. And then flash forward to 22, and we have a new variety from Virginia Tech called Avalon that's just been released. And that's the first Southern, I always call it born and bred malting variety to come out of that program, with NC State close behind with another couple of varieties in the queue. So this is a very
let's stop for just a minute in this Virginia Tech variety. I think Erin has a question
I do.
that she wanted to get into that a little more specifically.
Yeah, directly relates to that. I mean, we have recently seen in our region that Virginia Tech has been working on developing some new barley varieties that offer improved characteristics for brewer's malt. Brent, what's going on with this?
Yeah, so when we first got started, Riverbend, we sat down with the folks. Gentleman's name is Carl Griffey, that was the head of the plant breeding program or small grains breeding, and his right hand man, Wincy Brooks. And we were just sort of having a lovely information exchange. And I'm presenting all this data of craft beer going bonkers in terms of growth rates and all of that, and telling him all these different things that are going on. And then they say, well, what would you like from us? I said, well, I'd love a 2-row malting variety with great flavor, high yields, and reproducible results in a commercial malt house setting. And they're like, great. So give us 10 years and we'll be back. And I was like, wait, what? No, I told
10
you.
years is a long 10 years is a long time for you.
Yeah, I was like, I told you craft beer is exploding right now. Like,
Right.
I need it. And they're like, trust the process. We're going to do our work and you're going to be very happy with the results. You just have to be patient. And I'm happy to say 10 years later, they delivered. We just finished our first batch of it. It's absolutely spectacular. And we're just pumped to get it out into the marketplace.
Yeah, that's the Avalon malt that you mentioned a minute ago to us.
Yeah.
Describe some of those characteristics that make it so outstanding.
Yeah, so so when barley breeders are doing their work, they are crossing 2 parents. In this case, one was thoroughbred and one was a continental 2-row, the 6-row and a 2-row. Selected only the 2-row parents. They work with University of or the USDA lab in Madison, Wisconsin to do test malting of it all the way along these processes. They're working towards elite lines. But as I always joke, there's no number for flavor. So I pestered them and I said, please send me some of these elite lines. Let us do little 10-pound batches and tell you what we think of them. And what came out when they got down to about half a dozen, they sent us samples. And this one, it was a serial number at the time, just like hops start out as a serial number before they get a cool trade name. Same with barley. So this variety, blah, 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 81, really jumped out at us as having just, the body and mouthfeel of it was just a step above. It's almost like this sort of, it sounds a little gross when I say it, but like, think about like a rich, like coffee drink, like the milkiness of it, like coffee creamer. And so think about coffee creamer plus honey plus watermelon. And that's what I got. And I was like, all right, bring it on. Like, let's get this in here as soon as possible. And so just richer and than some of the other barley varieties that we had worked with. And what I love is it made it through 10 very challenging years from a growing perspective. We had, flashy rain events one year, droughts the other, you name it, Mother Nature threw it at us over the last 10 years. And Avalon weathered all those storms. And now we've got something really special to work with.
And I think that's a malt that will be growing here in our region of the country, certainly in Virginia. And Sam, Fonda, that's just down the road from you. Virginia Tech's just down the road from you. What about, I hope you're looking forward to finding some of that Avalon malt when it gets into the commercial side.
Please tag me a few pallets.
Yes. We've got a couple of truckloads to play with from the 2022 harvest and really looking to scale it up as we go into 23. I always have to remind folks, we don't make widgets. It's an agricultural product that we're dealing with. So we have to simultaneously build market demand as we scale up seed source. So we have to sort of build those in concert. And so we're doing that now, but it's a multi-partner thing. We've got growers that are just what we refer to as certified seedsmen. All they do is grow a number one crop quality that's not going to see a malt house. It's just going to go back into the field as certified seed for the following year. And so there's another part of the seed grower, researcher, maltster, brewer network that we're cultivating and working with to help stand this variety up at a,
or at least send me a couple of bags.
oh yeah, totally.
I can do some 10-gallon batches.
Oh yeah,
he can be a market tester. He can be a good one market tester.
totally.
Well, but as we are hearing here, you've got the farmers in this process, the universities in this process, you've got malt houses in this process, and Brent's not the only. Riverbend is not the only malt house that will be working like with Avalon and all these other malts that we're seeing. But we also then have all the small brewers that adopt and adapt to these new malts and different malts. It's got to be quite an economic impact in our region now. I mean, Brent, do you have any numbers, figures, or anything that you could enlighten us on that economic impact to the region?
We're as an industry, we're collecting that information nationwide. So we've got about 60 craft malt houses across the nation, varying scales, but again, the way I like to think about it is new market development. So if we're malting 4 million pounds, we're buying ish 4.5 million, let's say, a pound. So that market previously didn't exist for farmers to access. They just went straight into feed. And so malting prices per bushel pay a really nice premium on top of feed. So that's a long way of saying, yes, there's a positive impact. I don't have a pretty round number for you, but it's definitely substantial. We work with about a dozen growers sprinkled throughout the South.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I mean, I understand you don't yet have that, but that's all these new developments are coming online. I would think that it'd be a great grant funded project for some agricultural organization, maybe just to kind of to study up on that. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, the Craft Malt, the Craft Maltsters Guild is actually in the we hope early 23 to do kind of a wide scale survey that's looking not only for economic impact, but also starting to drill down on some of the sustainability benefits of sourcing local. To put things in perspective, the closest major malt house to where Sam is Breese, and that's 1,800 miles away from where he is, and they buy their barley from Wyoming. And so there's a disconnect there. There's a lot of travel involved. So there's just something we kind of want to put on people's radars, if they're, and I love that he's making his Oktoberfest with our malt, because that's always kind of the last holy grail for craft maltsters to crack into. It's usually like, I'm making an Oktoberfest, I'm using German malt, end of story. And so really refreshing to see that style getting, some craft malt injected into it. That's beautiful.
Sam, what percentage of your malt usage is made up by craft malt? Can you estimate that for us, or do you have an idea?
Yeah, I can estimate. I would say probably, sorry, I'm on low battery. The percentage, I would say around 80 to 85%.
Is that something as far as your malt usage that you could put into terms of dollars, or like a dollar estimate as to what you spend on malt per year?
Per year, I can tell you per month. From Riverbend, we probably spend anywhere from $5,000 to $8,000 a month on Riverbend. But yeah, on occasion we'll use some non-craft malt whenever I've forgotten to order, but it's not going to go into anything like Haggard IPA or Cool Reef Lager like that we promote that we use craft malt.
That's beautiful stuff. It's most breweries around that size, I mean, I guess to sort of round number it, probably are using ish 100,000 pounds of malt per year. And so the economic impact really spools up. I mean, you think about Riverbend, we've got 16, 17 employees. We're working with 12 farmers. There's trucking companies, there's seed cleaning companies, there's all sorts of things that are all lifted up by this whole infrastructure piece that's developed over the last decade. So yeah, it's definitely important. It's and it's exciting to see we're still working with ways to engage the consumer. We, the guild, have what we call the Craft Malt Seal program, which recognizes breweries that use over 10% craft malt, and obviously Weathered Ground crushes that goal. But we're still looking for ways to sort of get the consumer to sort of engage and realize, like, oh, this is super cool. This brewery is really going above and beyond by sourcing local, and wow, this lager I'm drinking is super fresh and really a cut above. We're hoping that they'll make that connection between sourcing local and fresh and great quality and sort of the extra added value proposition that comes along with all those things. So the seal was sort of developed as a way of sort of shining a light on craft breweries and distilleries that use more than 10% craft malt across their organization. Much in the way the Brewers Association Independent Seal was designed to sort of highlight folks that were independently owned. We were looking at a way to sort of shine that light on breweries, give them a point of differentiation at market and in their tap rooms. And it's been fairly successful. We've had well over 100 breweries sign up, breweries and distilleries across the nation.
So Sam, I see that we have your can here on the Saison has, and you can't see this right now, but I just see that it has the Craft Malt certified label on your label. And
yeah, so we're proud of that, and we put it on our labels now. I think, like Brent said, to be able to put that on your cans, you have to use at least 10% of grain bought from a maltster in the it's a craft maltster, and I think we use like 80%, so we're well above that, and we're proud to stamp that on there and tell people that we use local ingredients, at least a lot of local malt, and yeah, if I forget to pay my dues, they're going to send me a message telling me I got to rip that off of there.
Oh, well, I hope you don't forget to pay your dues then. You better pay those dues.
Yeah, I'm just bad at checking emails.
all good. No, but it's absolutely, relationships like this that we're absolutely, front and center when it comes to the craft malt conversation. We see it as like a symbiotic relationship of shining a light on each other and sort of building that awareness from the ground up to the retail shelf. So it's we really appreciate that. I mean, can design, artwork, the space is precious. We know that, and so anytime we see our logo as Riverbend or the Craft Malt Seal, we're just honored to be a part of those projects.
Sam, can you review a few of your popular Weathered Ground beers that have craft malt? Sounds like you use obviously tons of it, but what are some of the more popular ones?
So right now I'm tasting our Oktoberfest that will be out first week of September, and that's 100% Riverbend Malt. Their Munich, their Heritage, and their Pilsner goes into that, and a little bit of their Grape Chip. And then Cool Ridge Lager is our flagship lager that features their Cumberland Pilsner malt as well as their Heritage malt, and that's it. And then we've got, any Farmhouse Ale that you have from us is going to have their malt in it, as well as our IPAs. We typically use their specialty malt in our IPAs, and we use a lot of Carolina Malt House's base malt in our IPAs. And then all through our like amber colored and dark colored beers, you'll find their base malt, Cumberland Pilsner, as well as Heritage malt. And then I think you said you had a Blissful Vice. That's our Hefeweizen. I think that's 60% Appalachian wheat, 40% Cumberland Pilsner. It's all wheat. Nice. Pilsner. It's got some flaked wheat in there that's not from them. It's not malted though.
Yeah. Well, I know you use some other small malt companies. You might go ahead and throw a mention in for those, because we want to be inclusive here.
Yeah. Carolina Malt House.
And where's Carolina Malt House located?
They're from Cleveland, North Carolina. And then I've had one conversation, I think, with Epiphany, but we've never gone down that route yet. But I was thinking about using them because I know they do have a roaster, I think, and they do some darker stuff.
Yep.
So I was thinking about hitting them up for some roasted malts. But yeah, they're great companies as well, using local agriculture, and it's a lot of fun to be talking to real people. I mean, not that there's not real people that work for those other companies, but it's a more personal aspect for sure.
Yeah,
and that way with everything, like with Tim that's growing the berries for our beer down the road. He's down the road from us, and we're buying hundreds of pounds of blackberries and raspberries from him. It's a lot of fun to have personal relationships with people and to know that they're held accountable, and it's not just somebody way down the line, down the chain.
Yeah, and I'll throw in too that some of the brewers in West Virginia, especially probably in northern West Virginia, have experimented some with the house malts out of the Cleveland, Ohio area, I think, or northern Ohio anyway. But anyway, it seems to be growing. I mean, you're hearing now, 10 years ago, I didn't hardly hear about, 2 or 3 people that made malt, and now they're popping up. It's pretty fascinating. So Brent, your future sounds pretty good there.
Yeah, definitely. We got a chance to hang out at Fonda, Florida State of Origin a couple of weeks ago, and I love this event every year because Todd and his team at Fonda, Florida, curate a list of breweries to come in, and at almost every stop, I would be at Fair Isle Brewing from the Seattle market. Oh, we use Skagit Valley, and we use Link Malt, and I walk in and see the folks from Ohio, and they're using House and Rustic Brew Farm, and at each stop there was this connective tissue between really beautifully crafted farmhouse beers and local malt coming together with that taste of place, so to speak, the terroir. So really cool to see that. Yeah. So when we started Riverbend, there was probably 3 others in the nation. Now there's 60 plus. And, the neat thing that we're seeing now in the Craft Maltsters Guild is an international interest. So we've got folks in Italy and Japan and Scotland and Brazil and Mexico, and everyone is like, this is so cool. I've got local agricultural support in my blood too. Tell me how I can grow my business. And we've got some beautiful resources on the website for them to sort of dive in and, learn about everything from the engineering to the economics of building a small craft malt house.
Let's shift gears for a minute here. And something that I've been working on recently with our local Homebrewers Club is getting them to become more familiar with using local malts too. So we've put together, with your help, Brent, and with Sam's help, Brewing Stream is, and you guys are supplying the malt for a little project that our Kanawha Valley Homebrew Club is doing to make a beer this fall with a local malt, some of the Riverbend malts, giving them 3 different malts, and they're going to all craft their own little recipes, and we're going to see what they come up with. But I guess, Brent, it brings me to the question of how much penetration do you think local malts can have in the homebrew market, and what are you doing, or are your products available at homebrew supply shops?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely, I was the home brewer when Riverbend got started, and Brian had our little, 10-pound malt house in his basement. And so, home brewing is in our roots. And so we try to pin down a homebrew shop in each state at the very least. And we've got a couple, one in Asheville Brewer Supply that ships nationwide. So we kind of focus on that arena, and then, we make our all of our spec sheets available through Beersmith. So if folks are building recipes with that piece of software, they can work directly with a up-to-date C of A for the malt that they may have purchased from the local shop. And then, I have plenty of homebrewers that are just fascinated that they can pick up the phone and call and I will answer, and we can nerd out on technical questions about, mill settings and, mash temps and times and, recipe development in general. So I love geeking out with people about it and try to help whenever I can.
Well, where can people, just in general, people that want to get more information on craft malt, what are some good resources for them?
Yeah, so we're just riverbendmalt.com, and then the guild's website is craftmalting.com. And so that's kind of like a catch-all. You can find maps of where all our certified craft breweries are. You can find where all our member malt houses are. You can just learn more general information about how to make malt and a host of different things at craftmalting.com.
In our area too, I know we have beyond Weathered Ground, we have Little Fish Brewing in Athens, Ohio. They're a big advocate of local and craft malts too. I know they support the industry. Yeah. And I'm sure there are a few more that I'm not aware of or I don't know for sure, but it's a growing thing, and we'd love to help create that awareness and build the industry, because I'm all about local. We're all about local brewing. We're about local ingredients. So it's important.
Very important. And Sam, Brent, thank you all so much for your time today. It's been a very informative discussion. I've definitely learned a lot. I expect that our listeners will as well. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having us.
This brings us to the close of another podcast. Remember, you can subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast host. Thank you for listening to West Virginia Beer Roads.
West Virginia Beer Roads is a production of BrilliantStream.com.